Mr. Speaker, this rule will allow us to consider the Western Water and American Food Act, which is an important bill that will help us respond to the severe water shortages facing California, which I'm sure many of you have heard, and much of the western United States. Many people are confronting the worst drought that they've seen in many, many years, and a growing number of communities across the West have been acutely impacted by these arid conditions. While certainly this crisis has been caused by the drought, our environmental laws, as well as misguided and outdated regulatory restrictions, have exacerbated the situation. This bill addresses these policy failures and seeks to alleviate the impacts of drought in the short and in the long term. My own district in central Washington is dealing with serious water supply shortages. Actually, the whole state is declared a drought area. These are impacting the agriculture, energy, and manufacturing sectors, as well as families and small businesses that rely on an adequate and stable supply of water. These conditions are also increasing the threat of dangerous wildfires and increasing the likelihood of catastrophic wildfire, which could destroy homes, businesses, and large amounts of land, as well as crippling many communities throughout the West. Over the past 2 weeks in my state of Washington, we've already seen wildfire outbreaks across the state, in cities like Wenatchee and Quincy, in counties such as Benton, Grant, Adams, and Douglas. Sadly, with an extremely low snowpack and continuing drought conditions, we are likely to see even more fires. Mr. Speaker, as a third-generation farmer, I know firsthand the challenges facing many in our Western agricultural communities and the critically important role that water plays in agriculture's success. In recognition of this fact, earlier this year, I introduced H.R. 2097, the Bureau of Reclamation Surface Water Storage Streamlining Act. This measure will speed up reclamation's feasibility study process on surface water storage, spurring the development of new projects across the West, and I was very proud to have it included in this essential legislation that we are considering today. Water is not just a resource, it's the lifeblood of farming and ranching communities all across the West, and we must act swiftly and decisively to mitigate the impacts of this crisis that we're facing. The importance of water to agriculture production cannot be overstated, and we must take steps to support this vital industry that's responsible for feeding billions of people around the globe. In fact, today, I'm proud to say, the average American farmer is responsible for feeding upwards of 144 people. A drastic increase of just 50 years ago when that number was around 25. The reason for this change is simple and complex. Our modern farmers are growing more disease and pest-resistant crops that require less water, less pesticides, and better conserve our natural resources. Although modern agriculture allows us to use less water, for agriculture to flourish, we still must have a reliable supply of water. Mr. Speaker, the Western Water and American Food Act represents a comprehensive and bipartisan approach aimed at alleviating the drought's impacts through short-term and long-term measures. This bill will address the root causes of the crisis: complex and inconsistent laws, faulty court decisions, and onerous regulations at the state and federal level that have exacerbated an already devastating drought. In California and across the West, millions are facing water shortages and rationing, yet many of the drought's damaging effects are preventable, and H.R. 2898 aims to fix our broken regulatory system and bring our water infrastructure into the 21st century. This bill gives immediate relief to millions of Americans facing mandatory water rationing and invests in new water storage facilities to prepare for future droughts. Additionally, it will provide farmers with the certainty they need to produce the majority of our nation's fruits and vegetables, which feed our nation as well as people around the world. This rule also provides for consideration of H.R. 3038, the Highway and Transportation Funding Act of 2015, Part 2, a bill that will extend federal surface transportation programs, as well as the Hazardous Materials Transportation Program and the Dingell-Johnson Sport Fish Restoration Act until December 18, 2015, and fund these programs at the fiscal year 2014 authorized level. This extension will provide the Committee of Jurisdiction with additional time to continue their important work towards a long-term highway and surface transportation bill. Mr. Speaker, this extension will provide the House and Senate with time to work out a long-term surface transportation reauthorization bill in a bicameral, bipartisan manner. Every state transportation department in the country currently has numerous multi-year transportation projects that would benefit greatly from the increased certainty a 6-year transportation bill would provide. My hope, and I think the hope of everyone in this chamber, is that this short-term extension gives us time to reach an agreement that can provide certainty for all of our constituents. Additionally, this legislation will also allow us to work on a resolution for the Highway Trust Fund, which is facing a $90 billion shortfall. Failing to address the trust fund would have disastrous impacts across our country. If the trust fund were to go insolvent, many state transportation and infrastructure projects grind to a halt, leading to furloughed workers and lost capital from investments on existing projects. The cost of shutting down and then restarting all of these projects would be astronomical and would end up costing our taxpayers much more in the long run. Mr. Speaker, another short-term extension is not what any of us would have wanted. Our states need certainty, and that will only come from a long-term transportation authorization. While the bill before us may not be what we all would have preferred, it is a good stepping stone to something greater. I believe passing H.R. 3038 is the right thing to do and will allow us to consider a long-term 6-year authorization in the very near future. Mr. Speaker, this is a good, straightforward rule allowing for consideration of 2 critically important pieces of legislation. H.R. 2898 will help drought-stricken communities in the West by providing critically needed reforms to the broken regulatory system, as well as bipartisan solutions to help provide relief to families, farms, the environment, and the American economy.